Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for this series of PL Shorts on Teacher Tips for Family Communication. My name is Taya Haller and I'll be guiding you through this video module, Facilitating Family Conferences. The overarching goal of this series is to strengthen communication between teachers and families in order to support and enhance student learning. The information and activities in this PL Short have been aligned to the CEC and Cedar Center's high leverage practices and New Jersey's professional teaching standards referenced at the end. Because we know that professional learning must be interactive and relevant for it to be meaningful, the objectives of this video module are based on a praxis framework, inviting you into a process of reflecting on your experiences with and beliefs about family-teacher conferences, describing how to facilitate the joining process before, during, and after conferences, and determining your next steps in conducting conferences that are meaningful to families and beneficial to student learning. There will be moments when we ask you to pause the video in order to engage more fully in this process. Ideally, this process of reflection, information, and action is not solitary but communal. Therefore, there will be moments when we encourage you to connect with others as part of this process as well. With that in mind, you'll get the most out of this PL Short if you have the following resources readily on hand to mark up. The Communicating with Families inventory, which you used during the initial reflection in our series preview, and the Professional Learning Guide that corresponds with this video. Feel free to pause the video now to print these resources or open them with the PDF annotation tool. Let's start with reflection. Feel free to use your PL guide as you consider these ideas. Why do schools have family-teacher conferences? What do you hope to accomplish during family-teacher conferences? Think about the most rewarding family-teacher conference you've had, what made it so successful. Think about the most challenging conference you've had, what made it so difficult. How do you think family-teacher conferences impact student learning? And how do you feel right now about family-teacher conferences and why? You can also add your current practices related to family-teacher conferences to the Communicating with Families inventory under What You Do Now. And consider relevant vulnerabilities, strengths, needs, and supports. Feel free to pause this video while you complete these reflections. If you are engaging in this series with others, this would be a great discussion to have together. Feel free to pause the video to exchange ideas with a colleague. As we turn our attention to educational research and exemplary practices in the field, feel free to add to the possibilities section of your Communicating with Families inventory and use your PL guide to jot down any notes. Just as we teach our students to adopt a questioning stance when they approach nonfiction texts, we should approach research and new information in the same way. Using the big questions proposed by Kylene Beers and Robert E. Probst can help us critically reflect on what's been presented. So we'll provide time for you to consider these questions. What surprised you? What changed, challenged, or confirmed what you already knew or have experienced? Research reveals that a concept in family systems literature known as the joining process can help schools develop strong family-school relationships. This refers to a process in which school communities welcome families into the school, honor their participation by affirming their efforts, engagement styles, and funds of knowledge, and connect with families through a focus on the children and their learning. The result of the joining process is family empowerment, that is, an increased capacity to support their child's learning and partner effectively with schools. As one of the major events that schools host to promote family engagement, family-teacher conferences are a crucial means through which we can facilitate the joining process. Two questions can guide us as we welcome families to conferences. How are we inviting families, and how are we ensuring they feel like they belong and can fully participate? Schools typically invite families through mass communication in a variety of ways, such as their website and social media, email listserv, text and communication apps, robocalls, and physical notices. As teachers, we can extend our own invitation in many of the same ways. This lets families know there's an actual person at the school looking forward to meeting with them. But personalizing invitations is even more effective because it lets them know that you are looking forward to meeting them specifically and that their unique child is significant to you. Depending on the number of students, it may not be practical to personally invite every student's family. In that case, we can prioritize families whom we haven't been able to meet yet or whose children would most benefit from our partnership at this time. Making every effort to translate invitations into the dominant language of our students' families also cultivates a sense of belonging and enables them to more fully participate. Personalized invitations can come from a variety of people. Co-teachers can extend invitations together or on their own using the royal we. Students can make invitations for their families. The more authentic this is with them sharing their own goals and learning products to be discussed, the more compelling it will be for their families to participate. A family liaison, cultural broker, or other mediator figure can also extend invitations. Providing information that gives them a clear picture of what to expect can also make families feel more welcomed. Families want to know who may participate in the conference, such as children, additional family or community members, translators, and staff members. Families also want to know what will happen during the meeting. A short agenda and tips on how they can prepare may be helpful. Where will the conference take place? The room number and floor or wing, as well as logistical information like parking or nearby public transit, can be especially helpful to families new to the school. Being available to meet via phone or video conference ensures those unable to attend in person are still able to participate. When will the conference take place? Listen to what families say will work best for them as much as possible. As one school principal found, some parents may prefer to meet in the morning because it's easier to tell their employer that they will be late than ask to leave early. While most schools designate specific dates and times as part of their calendar, some families may have conflicting schedules. Offering to meet with them at another time will make them feel welcomed and build relational trust. And finally, why are conferences occurring? Explicitly state the purpose for a meeting ahead of time. We can continue to welcome families during conferences as well. For in-person conferences, a welcoming space is clean and orderly. The room number and all relevant teachers' names are clearly posted outside the door. Families feel a greater sense of belonging when their child's work is displayed. Perhaps there is even a welcome slide or poster representing the linguistic diversity of the class. Some seating arrangements can counter power dynamics, such as sitting at a round table or sitting next to each other at a rectangular table, or giving family members the most comfortable chairs. For virtual conferences, a welcoming space is free of distractions. The background might be an organized classroom, a neutral virtual background, or the same welcome slide being used in person. Make sure an interpreter is present if needed, but talk to and maintain eye contact with family members. Live translated captions in virtual meetings or translation apps may be helpful when an interpreter is not available. Learning a few key words or phrases in the family's preferred language can also go a long way in making them feel like they belong. When meeting someone for the first time, we can prevent wrong assumptions by asking what they would like to be called and their connection to the student, and introduce ourselves and any members of our teaching team as well. Ideally, co-teachers would facilitate together. When that's not logistically possible, decide ahead of time how the missing partner should be acknowledged and their welcome extended to the family. After introductions, consider beginning the meeting by complimenting their child or sharing a recent success story. After conferences, we can express our appreciation for families who participated. Sending a quick thank you note via text, email, or handwritten note demonstrates that their time and contributions were valued. 2 questions that can guide us as we honor families during conferences are, how are we valuing their expertise, and how are we creating space for their questions, concerns, and ideas? Before conferences, this might look like providing a survey to develop a shared agenda. For example, we can ask families to share how they think their child is doing in school, including their strengths and areas for growth, as well as their likes and interests. They can also provide feedback on our routines and instructional practices, such as what has worked well for their child, what has been difficult, and any suggestions they may have. Furthermore, families can share information about themselves, how they support their child's learning at home, what they need from us or the school, and any other items they'd like to discuss. Increasing the survey's ease of access may also improve results, such as enabling responses through an online form, text and communication app, or audio recording. During conferences, we can honor families by practicing perspective taking, also known as cognitive empathy, or the ability to understand how a person feels and what they may be thinking. There are many ways to practice perspective taking during conferences, but being a good listener is key to them all. For instance, we can revise the agenda based on family input and provide sufficient time for them to express ideas, questions, or concerns. The Flamboyant Foundation suggests we start with the question, what do you hope to get out of this conversation? Other useful questions are, can you help me understand how you see this, and what makes you feel that way? It may be helpful to simply say, tell me more, or ask open-ended questions to clarify what they've said, such as, what do you mean by? Reflective listening cultivates cognitive empathy as well. Act as a mirror by listening for key phrases and paraphrase what you've heard back as a statement or a question. A spin on this is stating the implied. Articulate what you understand to be the underlying message being conveyed. This gives the family an opportunity to further explain or clarify their concern. Observing body language, tone of voice, and facial expressions can also offer clues as to how someone is feeling. Likewise, paying attention to our own body language is important if we want families to feel like they are being heard. Communication experts suggest that nonverbal messages can be 3 times as powerful as verbal ones. For example, maintaining eye contact, nodding, using facial expressions that respond to the emotion being shared, leaning forward, having an open posture, and keeping hands still all demonstrate attentiveness. On average, people can process information 4 times faster than they can talk, which means it is easy to start thinking about our response or the next agenda item rather than focusing on what is being shared. This is especially true if we find ourselves disagreeing with or feeling defensive about something that was said. It is important in those moments to focus our energy on listening well, because people tend to misinterpret information or distort its intended meaning once they begin to disagree. Understood is an organization committed to helping those who learn and think differently discover their potential. Consider these words from the Understood Facebook community as parents explain what they wish teachers knew before parent-teacher conferences. Being mindful of these perspectives can help us be more empathetic to families with children who learn and think differently. Of course, it is not enough to simply listen. We must address their concerns and find a plan of action together. It can also be difficult to keep meetings to the allotted time slots. Acknowledging that time constraint and planning for a follow-up meeting or phone call if warranted is a way to honor all families involved. After conferences, it is critical to follow through on any action you promised the family. It is also worth considering how we may honor students and their perspective. Student-led conferences, or SLCs, are an exemplary way to do this. During SLC, students use sentence stems or a general script to lead the conference. They create a portfolio of their work to share, reflecting on what they've learned in areas of growth as well as struggles or challenges. They also identify a learning goal for themselves or ask for advice and support in a particular area. After the student has presented, they lead a discussion or Q&A, which ends in the development of an action plan. SLCs honor students because they are empowered to share what they're proud of and celebrate their full identity. SLCs also help students take ownership of their learning journey and develop important skills in organization, self-reflection, goal setting, self-advocacy, and leadership. They are particularly powerful for struggling students because being part of the decision-making process tends to have a transformative effect on one's attitude and behavior. SLCs also result in greater attendance of family members as well as enhanced instructional practices of teachers. They enable both families and teachers to better understand the student, including what helps them learn and what makes learning challenging for them, which means families and teachers can provide better support in the future. Questions that can guide us as we connect with families through a focus on their child's learning and development are: how are we portraying students' strengths and weaknesses as they progress toward academic and social-emotional milestones, and how are we sharing strategies, resources, and services that will enhance student learning? Before conferences, we can create an agenda and gather resources to highlight each student's progress. Haiti and Timberly's feedback model offers 3 helpful questions to guide us in this process. Where is the student going? This is when we share learning goals and the criteria for reaching those goals. Keep the writing maxim show, don't tell in mind by collecting resources that exemplify this goal. Second, how is the student going? This is when we share evidence of the student's progression toward the learning goal through sample learning products, observations, data, and current supports. We can prepare student work by highlighting or using Post-it notes to point out specific examples of success, skills gained, and areas for improvement. Jotting down notes about a specific behavior, the context in which it occurred, and relevant value statements explaining why the behavior matters can help us develop important observations to share. We can also create visuals such as charts and graphs for data and practice explaining what it means in family-friendly language. Explaining the strategies, scaffolding, accommodations, or modifications we provided to support the student and their effectiveness can paint a clear picture of the student's current performance. Third, where to next. This is when we explain potential next steps that would advance student learning toward that goal. These suggestions, in addition to ideas provided by the student and family members, will provide the foundation for the action plan that will be developed during the conference. We can brainstorm a list of possible action steps and gather relevant resources needed to implement those action steps, such as flashcards, question stems, games, activity guides, or manipulative kits. Effective family engagement is interactive. As we share students' accomplishments and areas of growth through student work, observations, and data during the conference, we can engage families by giving them opportunities to examine the artifacts presented and ask questions. We can also invite families to share their own observations about their child's learning and social-emotional development in real-world contexts. The same is true when discussing student supports. An interactive dialogue about what works at home and at school provides a more holistic view of the student and more tools for both teachers and families alike. It also reveals areas in which a student may benefit from additional support and how teachers and families may be able to advocate on their behalf. In addition, we can model and practice an activity that families could do with their child, such as using provided discussion prompts to initiate conversations about books, math problems, or other topics of study. We can also connect with families by collaboratively developing an action plan to advance student learning and development. The action plan should consider specific things stakeholders can do in response to an identified need and determine the time frame for completion. These stakeholders include students, family members, and teachers, as well as additional service providers or resources if warranted. For example, if a student needs to improve their study skills in science, the teachers might commit to providing the student with a study guide at the start of a new unit. The student might plan to create a Quizlet study set and review it for 10 minutes every day, and the family might use question stems they learned during the conference to initiate a discussion with their child twice a week. They might also consider visiting the local library to browse books and videos about the topic being studied or inquire about a relevant museum pack. After the conference, we can follow through with our responsibilities on the action plan and let families know when items have been completed. After a few weeks, we can check in with families regarding the students' progress and their implementation of the strategies discussed and invite them to share any follow-up questions or concerns. Academic Parent-Teacher Teams, or APTTs, are an exemplary way to connect families to their child's academic development. The APTT model was developed in 2009 by Maria Paredes in response to families requesting help in supporting their child's learning. Research indicates this is a significant role that parents play in their child's education and one that many families express a desire for more support from schools in fulfilling. While APTTs are a school-wide endeavor, we can also apply some of the same strategies as individual teachers or with our PLC. APTTs consist of 4 meetings throughout the school year, 3 75-minute team meetings in which all the students' families gather together with the teacher, and 1 30-minute individual session in which each student and their family meet with the teacher privately. The team meetings are generally held in the beginning of the year, winter, and spring. During each team meeting, parents learn about a specific grade level expectation, consider academic performance data, practice activities they can do at home, set a relevant goal for how often they will do the activity with their child, and leave with all the necessary materials. The individual session is generally held sometime in October or November. During this meeting, the participants discuss the students' progress both at home and at school and co-create an action plan to support the students' continued growth. Research shows that when parents are part of APTTs, their child makes significant gains in reading and math. Families feel empowered to support their child's learning with their new set of tools and deeper understanding of their roles. In fact, one study found that more than 94% of parents said APTT meetings improved the way they help their children with schoolwork. They are also more likely to attend events at the school. Furthermore, teachers develop stronger relationships with their students' families. In other words, APTT builds capacity in all stakeholders involved. When thinking about what you learned about how to leverage the joining process before, during, and after family-teacher conferences, did anything surprise you? Did anything change or challenge what you already knew or had experienced? Did anything confirm your own experiences and knowledge? Feel free to pause this video as needed to jot down your responses to this information on your PL guide. If you are engaging in the series with others, this would be a great time to share your thoughts with one another. Feel free to pause the video to exchange ideas with a colleague. We'll end by developing a short action plan. First, take a look at the Communicating with Families inventory, Part 2. When considering how to facilitate the joining process through family-teacher conferences, do any new vulnerabilities, strengths, needs, or supports come to mind? Feel free to pause the video to jot down any new thoughts when you look back over these questions. Use these pages on your PL guide to map out the next steps you may take. As we recommend possible next steps, check off any actions that fit your needs and the needs of your students' families. One possible next step is to make a plan for inviting families. For instance, you could create an invitation template using the 5 W's, schedule email or text messages, or review your class roster and prioritize personal invitations. Another possible next step is to prepare to meet with linguistically diverse families. For example, you could create a welcome slide or poster that represents the linguistic diversity of your class, ask about your school policies and procedures for translating documents and providing interpreters, or learn a few key phrases in your students' family's dominant or preferred languages. Or your next step might be to collaborate with your colleagues, perhaps by discussing expectations with co-teachers about preparing for and facilitating conferences, sharing goals for personally inviting families and celebrating each other's successes, or developing family activities that support shared curricular goals and student needs. Maybe your next step is to develop resources, such as a pre-conference survey for families to complete, a cheat sheet or visual reminder of listening tips, or a conference planning template that includes blank space for items such as participants, questions and concerns, learning goals, successes, areas for growth, supports, resources, and a plan of action. Or perhaps your next step is involving your students by giving them time to create invitations for their families, having them select learning products to discuss at the conference, or asking them to identify a learning goal they'd like to share with their family. Based on your inventory of vulnerabilities and needs, along with our recommendations and your own ideas, what are your next steps? What is one thing you can do to facilitate the joining process for your students, families, before, during, and after conferences? Be as specific as you can so that you have a clear, concrete plan in place. Include who in your professional learning community may be able to support you in this plan. Alternatively, refer to the guiding questions for each stage of the joining process to formulate your plan for conferences. Take a minute to pause this video if needed to think about and write down your next step. Thank you for joining us. Keep the Communicating with Families inventory on hand for the next PL short of your choice in the series. If this is the last video you'll be watching in the series, please share your thoughts with us. Look for the Give Feedback icon under this PL short on the LRC-South website.